the others, right? The walk. This is the number one place people have problems with their dogs. And when I work with clients, and when those clients tell me I'm having problems on the walk with my dog, a lot of people, from a trainer perspective, their brain goes right to do your heel position, enforce your heel position, do this, do that, right? Like it's the answer is always the same as far as how to work through it. But one thing that I've done over the last couple of years, or really tried to force myself to do more, is try to figure out what the client truly is doing when you're not present. Because I think a lot of clients, what they do is as soon as they go in for their training session, they change it, right? They put on their training cap, they enforce things differently than they normally would, they structure their walk differently than they normally would. And that's why so many times we see that we're not able to replicate the problem, and we're not able to give them good enough guidance on how to restructure things at home, right? So I'll use an example of a dog that I was working with, right? We had this dog and been doing follow-up sessions with him. He's doing great in his follow-up sessions. And consistently she would come back and she'd be like, the walk is going really good, but there's, A, B, C, or D issue that I saw this week, right? And every time I'm just kind of like, man, like what? I was having a hard time really wrapping my brain around exactly what was going wrong. So, the session that I went in with this client, I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to really get into their head. I'm gonna try to really get them to just like open up and show me exactly what they normally would do at home, right? And there were a couple of things that we were finding. Thing number one, this client was allowing this dog to take potty breaks like every 100 feet, it seemed like. Right? And the client was following the rules, which are, she would tell the dog come, the dog would come, and then like she would go 100 feet and then say, okay, and let him go off and pee, right? And then she would say come, and she would enforce to come, and then she'd go another 100 feet and say, okay, and let the dog go off and pee. And it's like, the dog wasn't doing anything wrong, like objectively there was nothing wrong about that. Like when in command, she was enforcing the command. When not in command, she was letting the dog do whatever it wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
But because she was doing such frequent breaks, this dog was constantly of the mindset of just like, get ready for the next break, get ready for the next break, get ready for the next break. And because of that, she was like nurturing this state of mind within the dog of basically just like never relax into the expectation and truly become compliant because I'm going to be free again in a minute, right? And the dog's sitting there and you're keeping him in this like elevated level of stress because of that, making him that much more likely to react to a trigger once he saw it. Right. So that was one thing that we saw that she was doing. Past that, obviously, as we've historically seen with other people before, they tend to have an inconsistent routine of what they do when they actually see the trigger. Right. So this dog's particular trigger is cars. Right. Particularly like loud. Like if you get one of those cars, it's got the big like fucking like motor off the back, or like a bus or a motorcycle or something like that. He can be very reactive to those. Right. So consistent routines. Right. So how do we go about fixing this? Right. Let's create some predictability to things. This is what I do with my dogs. This is what I do with my clients' dogs. And upon implementing this specific routine done almost to a T, you should have little to no issues with your dog on the walk. So thing number one, I get that some people live in apartments and need to like let their dog go to the bathroom on the walk, obviously. I am by no means anti let your dog go to the bathroom on the walk. But some people get so overboard with it, right? It's like they look at the walk as the place where like, oh my God, well, I know he peed at the beginning of the walk, but it's been 3 minutes and he might need to pee again. It's like, guys, like how many times are you going to the bathroom and you're dating? Like I promise you your dog can hold it. I promise you, right? And by constantly catering to the dog and giving them these potty breaks and thinking, oh my God, he might need to pee. Oh my God, he might need to poop. Oh my God, he might need to sniff that tree for whatever reason, right? You are never allowing them to get into the groove of just being compliant and being comfortable with being compliant. So here's my thing. This is kind of the happy medium compromise that I've come up with over time, I think, for my clients. Before I go to take my dogs for a walk, I make sure they completely eliminate and relieve themselves before we ever start the walk. So let's say you have a house that has a backyard. Let your dog into the backyard for 5 minutes before you start the walk, right? And really let them go. Really let them pee on everything, get everything out of their system, confirm that you just went. Unless you're going on like an hour and a half long walk, you should be good for the large bulk of this walk.
Yeah.
Right? So do that, right? If you do not have a fenced-in backyard and or you live in an apartment, as soon as you get out of your front door, have some sort of area that you could have be like their free area where it's basically like a simulated backyard, right? Let them go. Let them sniff around in that area to their heart's desire. Like let them totally get everything out of their system, right? Just check that box past just you then being confident that you could enforce a strict criteria with your dog. If your dog did actually need to go in that moment, they're not going to have to go anymore, which will decrease stress on the walk of like, holy shit, I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right? And you allowing them to have that little burst of like, get a little bit of your energy out of your system before we actually start the walk will make when you go to actually enforce the walk that much easier.
Yeah.
Right? So you're starting off on such a right foot with things. Because consistently I hear clients tell me I start my walk and the first 5 to 10 minutes are messy. The dog's pulling and this and that. Like instead of allowing your dog to do that on the walk and rehearse that, just don't give them the expectation initially. Let them do their thing. Right? Then start your walk. Right?
Yep.
So do that. From there, enforce your positioning strictly. Enforce it strictly. Whatever your criteria is. If you're somebody that does the heel, enforce your heel strictly. If you do the come or the in the bubble like we do, enforce that nice and strictly and go about your walk. Right? And one more caveat to the going off to go to the bathroom. Another clear routine that I enforce is if I'm going to release my dog to sniff around, I never, ever, ever do it on the sidewalk. I never go like we're walking down the sidewalk and okay, we're going down the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I think visual patterns and predictability is so key for dogs. And I think having a lack of a clear visual difference of walking time versus free time can really throw them off. This is something else that the client that I was talking about, the car reactivity, was doing as well. Is when they would say, okay, they'd never even changed what they were doing. It was just kind of like, we walk for 100 feet. Okay. Walk for 100 feet. Come. Walk for 100 feet. Okay. Right. Like it's just really visually confusing for the dog.
Exactly.
Right. So always release, then go off into an area. Right. Okay. So then you start your walk, you go about your walk. Routine number 2 on the walk. When we see triggers, and I personally try to do this with any dog, regardless of their level of reactivity that they may have or not have, right? Okay. Every time we see a trigger, pull off to the side, give yourself as much distance as you feel comfortable with, and then hold the dog to a particular expectation. Sit down, don't care what it is, hold them to a particular expectation, correct firmly for non-compliance of said expectation. And I'll even throw in the caveat of if you want to reward heavily for compliance of said expectation, go ahead and do it in that situation, right? This is one people give me shit on all the time. They're like, oh, well, like these people say that you should never be stationary if your dog is reactive. We've talked about that in past podcasts. I'm not going to get super in depth on that right now. I promise you it's going to be fine. I promise if you're telling me that your dog can't hold a sit in the presence of another dog because they're that reactive, you probably need to work on your dog holding a sit in the presence of another dog because they're that reactive. Right? Don't use that as a goddamn excuse because the dog wants to move, which is why they're being reactive. So making them be stationary is I promise it's going to be okay. Promise it's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's such a cop-out.
So consistent, I don't even want to say it's a cop-out. There's nothing, again, this is not what we're intending to talk about. It's not wrong to be in motion. And technically, per the science, is it maybe a little easier for the dog to be in motion? Maybe. But I've said a million times, the reason why I like the stationary command is because 1, the dog should be able to do it. And 2, from the human perspective, if you are going to have a criteria that you're holding your dog to, a black and white criteria of the dog either being in the stationary position or not in the stationary position is much easier for you to see and enforce than is the dog in that heel position just right? Or they're walking with you, but are they looking back? It's just a little bit more gray when the dog is in motion, in my opinion.
Okay.
Right?
That makes sense.
Anyways, so do that every single time you see a trigger, whether your dog is going to react or not. And yes, I understand there's going to be circumstances it's not ideal to pull off to the side and do a sit, where it's going to be more ideal to keep walking, but those are fewer and further in between, where if you're enforcing the stationary command 99% of the times you need to just walk by, your dog should be practiced enough with being calm around a trigger where it's not a big issue, right? So let's again, I want to kind of recap from the beginning here. So as soon as you get out your front door, let the dog eliminate and do whatever they want for the first 5 minutes, but don't be walking. Have it just be a designated area. You're letting them do their thing. And start the walk, enforce your position very strictly. And anytime you see a trigger, pull off to the side, put your dog in a sit or a down, and enforce said position consistently. From there, depending on how long your walk is, if you're just going out 15, 20 minutes, just do that. Go home. At the end of the walk, you could let your dog do the same thing, eliminate, relieve themselves for 5 minutes or so, then take them inside, you're good to go, right? Okay. If you're going out for a long walk, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it may be, somewhere in the middle of the walk, you can give your dog another break. Same deal. Clear visual picture, pick a location, release, go off into a field, something like that. Let your dog sniff around, do whatever they want, obviously. And then once you're ready to start walking again, come, heel, whatever, follow the same procedure going back home. It sounds so stupid. A lot of people are going to listen to this and say, I already do that. But I will push back on and say, if you probably are doing that ish. Right? You're probably doing that ish. Right? So really take my words as literally as possible when I say, go through each step I outlined and ask yourself, are you enforcing that routine exactly how I am recommending? And if you are not, change it, enforce it that way, and I am telling you your walks are going to be so much better. I'm telling you they're going to be so much better. I'm telling you they are going to be so much better.
Oh, yeah.
So that's routine one.
Yeah, I love it.
And listen, like there's extra pieces we could add into the equation, but that's the bare bones of it. The only one I would say that, like, to not get too crazy with like, here's like a little adjustment here, a little adjustment there. The only thing that I would say is if you have a really energetic dog, on those breaks you're giving them, if you're walking your dog historically on a short leash, and when I say short, I mean like 4 to 6 feet, so like short to standard size leash, for those breaks, bring along a long line or a flexi lead or something so that the dog isn't rehearsing pulling into that leash. Because inevitably, if I have an energetic, like with Vinny, if I were to try to take him out on a 4-foot leash and say like, okay, in a field, he would spring to the end of the leash and fucking like choke himself or yank my arm out. And he's not doing anything wrong, guys. I told him okay. So like in his mind, it's like, boom, I get to go do whatever I want to do. And it's not really fair that I say like, okay, do whatever you want to do, but like stay within, you know, fucking 2 feet from me because you're on this 4-foot leash right now. Like that is going to create more stress as well.
Yeah.
So for your releases, you could put the dog on a longer leash for that, obviously. That's the only adjustment I will have people make to that.
For sure.
Okay, so that's the walk. That's your routine for that. Enforce it exactly like that.
Yeah.
Does that one make sense?
It all makes sense. The one that I would never think about is like what you're talking about with the sidewalk and like when you release, not staying on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I just never even thought about like, oh, that could make a really like confusing picture for the dog.
It's all pictures, right? That is exactly like you just said. That is a confusing picture for the dog because you, the human, are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like we know how easy it is for dogs in their day-to-day to like they go and lay on their bed or on their place board and then like 5 minutes goes by and they kind of look around like, wait a minute. Am I supposed to be here? Did you put me here? Right. Can I get up? But like, you know, like,
I know.
Because the picture is the same, right?
Yeah.
Like it's you sitting on your couch, right? And the dog laying on their bed, and they're like, I've seen this picture
Yeah.
before. Like I usually am supposed to stay here, right? So
Yeah.
we know how easy for shit like that to happen is. So you tell me if the dog is seeing the same picture on the walk of them doing whatever the fuck they want while you're walking on the sidewalk.
Right.
They're gonna am I supposed to be with you? Am I supposed to?
Yeah.
Be, you know what I mean? Like it's different. Where if we say
Yeah.
every time on the sidewalk, this picture, every single time is you next to me, the dog will start defaulting to that picture,
Yeah.
which is what we want ultimately.
For sure.
Again, getting back to making these things as easy as possible. The more predictable the picture is, the more easy it is for the dog to fall into the habit of doing said thing when they see that picture.